get going with our session. So off you go, ladies.
Okay, thanks, Sally. Okay, so welcome everyone. My name is Stephanie Crook. I am the student transitions coordinator. There's a lot of consonants in that title, I'm starting to realize. And with me is Amanda Angus, who is one of the academic advisors at the First Year Center. So we're going to be talking today about creating balance. We're going to start just by acknowledging that the University of Manitoba campuses are located on the original lands of Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and on the homeland of the Métis Nation. We respect the treaties that were made on these territories. We acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past, and we dedicate ourselves to move forward in partnership with Indigenous communities in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. So to begin our session, we have just a few sort of intro questions, not really personal questions, just some questions about some of the things we're talking about today. So Amanda's going to start with introducing us to those.
Yeah, so today we are using a, I guess, program that you guys can participate in the session today. If you go to www.menti.com, right at the top of our screen is the website. And then if you enter in this code, then you can participate in some of the questions that we have and participating throughout the presentation today. So to kind of kick us off with what we're going to cover, we kind of want to know what situation are you guys in? And then we can kind of talk about, some of these strategies that we're going to be sharing, how they may, pertain to your situation. So our first question is, how many of your courses are strike impacted? So we've got from 0 to 5. And then once you get onto the website, vote and share with us what you're kind of looking at with your courses. So it looks like most of you guys so far, at least, one of your courses is strike impacted. So you're balancing that. Looks like most people, there's 2 courses.
Yeah, definitely looks like most. There.
Yeah, just one who's voted 0.
And for some people that might be all your classes. You might only be in 2. Other people might be like about, well, sort of half your classes, I guess.
Yeah. We'll move on to the next slide. And that's okay if you can't, participate in this. The presentation will still be effective. Our next question is, are you balancing final exams and coursework? Yes or no? So that means, are you kind of doing both? So, trying to balance where, where you're like preparing for finals, and your coursework. That's continuing.
Right. Okay. We've got a tie. Oh, moved more towards yes, slightly.
A little bit more focusing on the yes and no. So today we'll talk about, how do you balance final exams and coursework? How do you prioritize what you should be focusing on at the moment? So we'll touch on that in a little bit. And then this question, so giving us kind of a rating, how confident are you feeling about balancing these final exams and your strike impacted courses? So you can give us a rating there. And this is all anonymous as well, so we don't know what you're voting or who's voting.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. So hopefully by the end of today's session, your confidence in balancing all of these responsibilities increases, and hopefully, you're on that further, the scale further right, feeling a little bit more confident.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to move on to the next question. This is our final one before we get into the content. What are you struggling with the most at the moment? So if you can just type in the word box there. And then, if there's some things that pop out to us, we'll try to, mention some strategies on how to, overcome some of these stressors or deal with some of them.
I can see that motivation word getting bigger. So must be a lot of people in that boat.
Yeah. Which I can totally understand as well, especially if you're in those strike impacted courses where you haven't really participated in them, for a good chunk of time. And then having to get back into those as well as managing final exams. I can imagine that that's difficult to get back into.
Yeah, and I think there is a lot of change too, right? There's the too much change. I think that's partly going into final exams, layering classes on top of it, maybe some of the, changing health restrictions and things that we've had going on. So just in general, there's a lot of change in society, I think. So that can be a lot.
Yeah. So I think a lot of these stressors that are popping up are areas that we're going to be covering today. A big piece, it looks like, is that motivation, procrastination, getting back into things. So that's kind of going to be at the beginning of our presentation, and then we'll get into just managing all of these things, how to prioritize them, and then a little bit into some additional resources that are available to you as students. So if we want to jump right into increasing motivation, Steph.
Yeah, that sounds good. And it did seem to be maybe the biggest concern that was just raised. So I'm glad that we're addressing something that's relevant. So we'll just start on the next slide here, Amanda.
There's a delay.
That's okay. That happens. So this is the question. It's not meant as something that you have to answer. You can just think about it a little bit, but just to kind of get you thinking about this question a little. So part of the challenge with motivation is the procrastination piece, right? And I did see that response as well from the Menti question. So why is it so easy to procrastinate? And I think it is particularly easy when you've had to stop something for a long time, like perhaps a lot of your classes, and to restart them. So why is that so easy? There's a few reasons. Probably you've thought of some of these already. But I think, with procrastination, there's sort of a few things that go into it. Part of it is not knowing where to start sometimes. So that can be the main issue for some people, that they don't know kind of how to restart their classes. Like, how do I kind of map out my syllabi all over again? How do I schedule my exams versus my classes? So that can be a big piece for a lot of people. And then an additional piece that comes in for people as well can be sort of a sense of, disappointment or shame over how their performance has been in the past. So especially when there is a delay where you have kind of stopped working on something for a while and you have to start again, it can bring up reminders. If you weren't doing super well in a class before, then it might not feel like something you really want to get back into, even if you think there's enough of your grade left to kind of increase your performance a little. So there might be other things at play as well, but those are just a couple of factors to keep in mind with the strike.
I think some things too is like the task sometimes when we're just looking at it from afar seems really, really big. And it kind of comes back to that point of that feeling of you feel like you have a lot to catch up on. And it just seems so big. Where do I start with this? And not knowing where to start, and just kind of that overwhelmingness. So
Yeah, I think that's probably the biggest reason for not knowing where to start for sure. It's just that it seems so overwhelming and big.
yeah. So
Yeah.
before we, I guess, get into some strategies on to help preventing procrastination, we want to hear from you. Are there any strategies that you guys use to prevent procrastinating?
Yeah, so it'll be another one of those questions where you can just type in your response. Some of you may have navigated away from Menti already, so we'll give you a second to get back in there.
Yeah,
And it can just be like a couple of words, yeah, or a
put
phrase. Yeah,
phone
that works
farther
too.
away. Yeah,
Yeah.
so I know that's for me anyway. The phone is a big distraction sometimes. It's kind of that outlet where you can go to procrastinate. So yeah, putting it farther away. I know there's even apps that you can use on your phone that kind of lock everything for a certain period of time. So the phone can also be a bit of a tool as well. I don't use strategies. Yeah, so we'll cover
enough.
some strategies in our next slide. Steph's going to talk about some things that we can do to help prevent it or to help us stay motivated. Set time blocks for strictly work and take breaks. So that's awesome, and that's something that we really promote. Is using a schedule and taking breaks, because breaks have a lot of value in the whole learning process. So another, creating a daily schedule or routine. So fantastic.
Yeah, these are all really great ideas. And those are even, I think, the one admitting, I don't have any strategies that I use.
Yeah.
It's a good thing to identify. So we're going to get into a few strategies. Some of them you all have already kind of identified, but I'll talk about a few. So Amanda and I were talking a minute ago about the motivation piece and, knowing that you have to get started with something that seems so big and so overwhelming. So one of the strategies to deal with that is kind of making your goals more specific. So there's an example that someone just put into their phone notes here for a certain day. So they're putting both, class items and also maybe personal things like going for a walk with a friend. It's really important to make your goals as specific as possible. So I would say the most specific goal that's listed here would maybe be reading those specific pages from Psych 1200. So point number 2 there, but sometimes you can't make it quite so specific. Like maybe, in the example of gathering sources for an English paper, maybe there is a source limit, or maybe there isn't. Maybe it's up to you. So you've decided, I guess to start off, I can spend about 30 minutes researching and gathering sources. So just putting start English paper is probably going to be too broad and also too overwhelming for you to really feel motivated to get started on that. It seems like, every time you look at your list of things to do, that this is like this big task. But the second example of spending that amount of time gathering sources is a little bit more manageable. So that can be a huge difference between feeling motivated and not feeling motivated. So that's the first one. And then another strategy that we're going to talk about is kind of breaking up your study time into blocks. So some of you mentioned that already as strategies you use. There is a technique specifically that we like to mention because it capitalizes on how human attention works. So we only have so much attention span. And so it's a good idea to take advantage of that so that you can have the most efficient work time possible. So it is possible, to set 1 hour break, like 1 hour blocks of working, but you're probably going to find that, somewhere in the middle, your motivation starts to drop off. So what we like to suggest is the Pomodoro technique for more efficient studying. So in that technique, you can set a timer. It can be at the link that we have. It can be basically any timer just on a phone or any kind of device, or even one of these old-fashioned ones like in the picture. And you can set it for 25 minutes and spend the 25 minutes working on one of the very specific tasks that you listed. and then take a 5-minute break. And obviously at some point in the day, if it's a long day, you're going to have to take a longer break. But spending those 25 minutes really concentrating and knowing you only have to spend that amount of time before you get a bit of a break can be really motivating. I don't know if you have anything to add about this one, Amanda, but I use it all the time.
Yeah.
And it really helps, especially because I have to write really long papers for a PhD program. So I couldn't just say, you know, I'm going to write for a whole hour. I'd be burnt out by the end of that, I think.
Yeah, I think just something to add to this is that this model does take time and it takes practice. So, you know, you may find in a course where you are really struggling to stay motivated in it, or just struggling to even get in there, and 25 minutes just feels really painful to you. I would even suggest like to try and get into this model of like a 25-minute, 30-minute block of time. Maybe start smaller if that seems too daunting to start with. So maybe start with a 5-minute work time and then a 1-minute break, or even just a 5-minute break too. Starting really small and then eventually building that time up that you're working on that will help over time. And then, you know, as you practice that and as you build up that practice of focusing, break, focus, break, eventually 25 minutes will come easily to you. So, and I think, yeah, like this is a great model to kind of structure your studying around. It's not something you have to absolutely like, you know, stick to, right? Like you may be writing a paper or something, and at the 25-minute mark, the timer goes, but you're on a roll, and you know everything's kind of coming to you. Then carry on for a little bit longer if you want. But I think like if you're struggling with that motivation and just getting started, start small. Make it your goal to get to this 25-minute, 5-minute break model. And then, you know, over time, as you are used to this, it'll become easier and you can kind of adapt it to where that sweet spot is for you. So.
Yeah, and I think Amanda's right. Like it does probably vary by subject for a lot of people too, especially at first. Or even, you know, versus whether you're taking a course more for interest or it's in your major area versus some other requirement that you're not super thrilled about. I think in this way, like kind of figuring out how much time you can spend working on something is very similar to like beginning to exercise. Like if you're a person who hasn't really exercised very much in a while, you might find, you know, okay, maybe I can sit on, you know, an exercise bike for like 30 minutes and that's totally fine for me. But if I'm lifting weights, I need to do like fewer repetitions than I used to do, right? So it's about figuring out what's manageable for you. Okay.
Can I jump in and just ask a clarifying question, ladies?
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
On the slideshow, it shows the website as e.ggtimer.com, and that just looks weird to me. So I just wanted to make sure that that is correct. Is there supposed to be, or is it just egg timer?
It is. I believe it's correct. It's supposed to be e.g.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that it was correct, because it looked a little strange. You know, you'd think it was egg
strange.
timer, but as long as look, Stephanie, I can see Stephanie right now is going and
she's looking it up.
I
was
right now.
Oh, it's
I should
denied for some reason. So we will.
Okay, we'll figure that out by the end of the session. I'll put the right link in the chat. We'll clarify. So just wanted to make sure. Thanks, ladies. I'll shut up now.
That's okay. Thank you.
No problem.
Perfect. Yeah, sorry about that. But yeah, any timer will work really. Okay, and then we just wanted to highlight a couple of resources as well. And actually I had seen that someone mentioned writing tutors earlier. There's also, in addition to writing tutors, study skills tutors available through the Academic Learning Center. So there's just a list on this slide of some resources that the Academic Learning Center provides, and they're all free for students. So they're all available. A couple things to highlight. So if you visit their website, which I guess for some reason we didn't link here, but we can definitely get that link for
We'll
you.
pop
I'm
it
not
in the
sure what
chat.
happened there. But anyways, when you go there, you can book appointments online. So it's really easy to see what their availability is coming up. It often does wind down in December a little bit. So depending what's available, you may need to make use of some of the other resources for now. One of the things that they are still running for a little bit of time are the virtual study halls, which you can also sign up for on their website. And it's basically a space where students who are working on different things can log on, and there's, it's usually on Zoom, I think. And there are academic learning center staff as well, and everyone just kind of works on their own thing simultaneously. So that can help to increase motivation a little bit too, because you know that other people are working on something. The link is in the chat now for the Academic Learning Center. And you can also message the staff from the Academic Learning Center as well if you have any questions. So that's a big resource, I think. Okay, and then we'll move on to the next slide. Okay, so now just coming to the idea of balance in general. So we talked about the motivation piece, sort of getting started. Now we want to talk about managing multiple things at the same time. So there's kind of 3 points that we wanted to briefly talk about today. So the first thing is to prioritize your tasks. So we've already talked about listing them out, but this is about, prioritizing is about figuring out what's important. Creating a study schedule, which some of you mentioned doing as well already, and taking some time to refresh, which is also really important. So we'll start with prioritizing tasks. So in order to clarify the importance of each task, there's a few different ways that you can look at it. In this particular circumstance, with having final exams at the same time as strike-affected classes in many cases, it's important to know that the university is asking students and professors to have final exams prioritized. And what I mean by that is that if you have a class and an exam scheduled at the same time, which is going to happen to some students, or very close together. So let's say you are a student who has one in-person class, maybe it ends at 5:30, and let's say you have an online exam at 6 o'clock and you have to be able to get home and onto your computer. So that would be kind of a close together example. It's important that the final exam gets prioritized in this case. So what you should do is approach the instructor or the professor who's teaching the class that is running during the exam, and you can let them know, hey, I have a final exam in whatever other class. I just want to let you know I'm missing class today for that reason, especially if there are things like participation marks or in-class quizzes or something that's due that day, then it's even more important to let them know. And there shouldn't be any problem with making arrangements with that instructor, even if there are, points that you can only gain during class or something like that. They should be allowing you priority for your final exam. If you did, for some reason, encounter any difficulties obtaining an accommodation from them, then you would need to contact an academic advisor in your home faculty. So whether that's University One or Science or Arts, wherever you are registered, you will want to contact an academic advisor in your home faculty. So final exam period is the biggest priority. Attending class obviously needs to be attended to as well, and then submitting term work on top of that. So attending class and submitting term work are kind of tied really in this case, but I think the one that's easiest to forget about and let go of, and it's really important not to, is the attending class piece. So we just want to encourage all of you who are restarting classes. It might be really tempting to not attend those classes again until January and just focus on exams. But it's possible that you might miss some really not only important course content, but information too about new due dates or how things are going to unfold for the rest of the course that could make it really difficult to keep up with studying for those and term work for those. So that's just something I wanted to highlight as well. So once you have determined the priority, you want to make sure that as part of creating sort of your study routine that you do have a dedicated study or workspace. That's only for studying, if at all possible. That's obviously not going to be the case for absolutely everyone. Even in my case, I know working from home during the pandemic has been at my dining table. So I don't just have a separate room that I can go to. It's different for different people. But as much as possible, you want to take whatever your space is and dedicate it to studying, even if it is only for the time period where you are studying, to sort of clear everything else off, maybe set up your books. It's good to create personal rituals as well to get you into more of a studying state of mind. It actually is something that will cue your brain, if you do it often enough, that this is the activity that we're getting into, and it actually helps to clear your mind. So you can do things like put on music, preferably music without lyrics usually for studying, but you can do that. You can make some tea or coffee, clear your desk, etc., just to cue yourself in. And once you're set up with your space, then you want to start creating your study schedule, which we will need the next slide to talk about. And I don't have control over that. Thank you, Amanda. So to create a study schedule, you have to start with your fixed commitments. Maybe that seems obvious, but it includes a lot of things that people don't always think about. I think classes and exams are probably the most obvious ones, but you might also be working a part-time job. You might also have sort of a loose schedule of going to the gym or doing other things in your personal life. So you want to put those in first to make sure that you make time for those things that are difficult to move or that can't be moved. Once you've identified those, then you want to make sure that you actually schedule in study time. So we've put in the 2-to-1 guideline that we usually recommend for students. And what that means is, you know, for classes that are still ongoing, for every hour in class, you spend about 2 hours outside of class. But just note that this is a guideline and not a rule. So if there's one course, or maybe there's not a lot going on in a certain week, you might not need to spend that much time. Or if it's, you know, a course that you are, for whatever reason, more familiar with the content for, and there might be others where you have to spend more than 2 hours. So it's just a guideline so that you can kind of block out your schedule and not underestimate the time that you need. And when you put in those blocks of time, you can see again that we are emphasizing specific tasks. So just putting, you know, study biology or study psychology is not going to be super helpful for you. But if you put in, you know, here I'm doing math problems for chapter 4, and in this slot, I'm going to preview the psych PowerPoint before class today. That will help you to keep up your motivation and make sure that you have enough time to do everything you need to do. Okay, and then finally, before actually we go to the
Did I skip ahead,
last
sorry?
piece. No, not at all.
Okay.
Before we go to the last piece about building in rest and things like that, we just wanted to ask as well if anyone has favorite study strategies to recommend to other students. So again, you can log into Menti and just type in, you know, a brief word or phrase there. Some of the strategies that we talked about were that Pomodoro strategy of blocking out your time and, you know, listing out specific tasks, but there are others. Sometimes it can be a certain study method or things that you like to do while studying, like put on music, etc. It's also possible that nobody has favorites anymore because they're tired of
That's
studying.
why they're here.
Yeah, it could be that too. Yeah.
I'll just share myself, you know, after doing a lot of these academic success workshops and researching, being a student myself, my favorite and most effective study strategy is practice testing. You know, just kind of for when you're preparing for final exams or just that regular upkeep in your class. Practice testing, I find, and from what I've researched, is the most effective. So, you know, doing old final exams, sometimes you can get your hands on those through the bookstore, through student associations, or doing the practice tests in your, or practice questions in your textbooks. Those are really helpful just because that helps you identify, you know and what you don't know. And then that gives you a starting point in your study sessions on, you know, what to study, the things that you don't know, right?
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite. I used to like creating my own questions as well.
Yeah.
I just felt like, you know, moving around that information into a question, putting myself in the position of a professor or a teacher, helped me kind of understand, okay, what is my teacher's expectations? So
Mhm. That's a really good point. And it's actually part of the process of creating the questions helps you to really make sense of the content, right? So it's one thing to read questions that were already made, which is also good. But if you have the time to make your own, it can really help you process the content. And it's also really helpful if you can't get your hands on any past questions from legitimate sources. So you know, with our digital environment, it can be tricky sometimes. There are lots of file sharing websites where students can get themselves into trouble sometimes for violating academic integrity kind of rules at the university and things. So obviously, if your professor is providing them, or the U of M bookstore, different student associations, that's good. But if you have a course where you don't really have past questions, creating your own is a great way to go. And yeah, this one's good too. So someone put this one in. So going along with study with me videos, I didn't know that those existed until a couple of months ago. I was working on some things. There's a whole genre on YouTube and other platforms of just people filming themselves just studying, or, you know, like they're just behind their computer working on whatever, and you can kind of do it at the same time, and it can feel like you're working along with someone. And if you're looking for kind of for those kind of strategies, we also have the study halls, virtual study halls at the Academic Learning Center that are they operate kind of similarly. So you can join those and maybe get the chance to go alongside other U of M students. Yeah, those are awesome.
Cool.
Okay.
We'll move on.
Yeah. So we just wanted to highlight the importance of taking time to refresh here, which I feel like sometimes sounds a little bit unrealistic. Like, how am I supposed to take time to refresh when I have all these classes, all these exams, especially now that they're at the same time? So we're not necessarily being unrealistic about it and saying, you know, you're going to have so much time to just spend doing whatever, you know, whatever you want to do. But it is really important to build in little breaks whenever you can. So even if it's a 15-minute time slot, it's important to kind of ask yourself in a given time slot, like, am I really on a roll with the subject right now? Or is it a better idea for me to take some time away from the computer and just go on a brief walk around the block, or even just check my social media for some messages, or whatever it is that you can fit into that time period. Again, it is kind of similar to like working a muscle physically, right? If you overwork it, you're going to end up injured in the academic context. You're going to end up burnt out probably. So you need to make sure that you build into your schedule time to take breaks and refresh.
I like to kind of, oh, sorry,
yeah, sorry, go
I'm
ahead.
cutting in. But I like to kind of also illustrate the importance of taking breaks by, I'm sure all of you have been in a situation where, you know, you're telling somebody something, or you're trying to remember something, and you rack your brain about it and you just can't remember. And, you know, as much as you think about it, it's on the tip of your tongue, but you just can't remember. Eventually you take a break and leave it, and as you're doing dishes or doing something entirely unrelated, and then that thought comes to mind, and it's like, oh, why is this coming to me now? Yeah. It's because our brains need that break for things to just kind of settle in there and make those connections and neurons fire. I don't know the scientific term for that, but that break is kind of when those little things start to make those connections when we're not really thinking about it. So that example kind of always comes to mind when we're talking about taking breaks.
Yeah. I mean, it's also similar to why it's not a good idea to keep studying right until your exam starts, because a couple of things will happen. You won't get a break to kind of remember those things that you're trying to think about that you studied, but you will also probably be cramming a lot of information in and you'll feel like you're learning it right before the exam, but then you will either A, forget it because you didn't spend enough time on it before, or B, you'll mix things up. So you might actually destabilize the things that you've already learned by doing that. So I always suggest that people don't study at the very least, an hour before the exam, because it's probably going to do more harm than good.
Great.
Okay, so on a similar vein to taking a break, we just want to talk about managing stress. So Amanda and I are not experts on managing stress necessarily. We're not like the campus go-to people on this, but we do have some tips for you. So we just wanted to do a quick, again, Menti poll if people had a couple of ideas. There's all
Things
kinds
that you
of
want to
different
share if
things.
you have anything. If you don't have anything, that's fine too. But yeah, if you have some tips that help you manage stress and you're happy to share them, share away. We'll give you guys just a couple minutes here to share any tips, and then we'll kind of go into some resources that we suggest.
Yeah.
Meditate.
Yeah, that's a good one. I think meditation too is very flexible, right? Like sometimes people get really into it and they spend an hour every day meditating, but you don't have to do that necessarily.
Yeah.
Just little bits of time where you can. Deep breathing is also good. That will definitely calm your nervous system.
Stretch. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Those are great ideas.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think anything that's focusing on you and your self-care, those are really great things.
And I think it's also like part of the thing about managing stress is kind of knowing the difference between taking a break and avoiding something. They're kind of different, right? So if you're actively, like the only reason you're stopping doing stuff is to avoid doing your coursework or studying for your exam, you'll probably end up filling that time with things that are really unfulfilling. So a good example for me is sometimes when I take a break from whatever I'm working on and look at Instagram or TikTok or whatever, it's really fun. And I scroll through a few videos and it makes me laugh and I feel better and I go back to doing what I'm doing. Other times, if I'm like really trying to avoid what I'm doing, I'll just like keep scrolling to the point that I'm not even enjoying it anymore, right? So part of managing stress is kind of trying to gear yourself towards refreshing versus avoiding. So you always need to build in time to refresh. So just some really general strategies, and then we'll provide you with some resources for more information on this and other things that we've talked about. The number one that we wanted to highlight was knowing your limits. So knowing what you can reasonably accomplish, whether that's, what can I accomplish today? And that can vary from day to day, right? We all have some days that feel really productive and other days that don't. And sometimes you can push yourself to be a little more productive than maybe you wanted to be. And other times it might be a really hard day. Maybe you're feeling really stressed. Maybe something happened in your life, right? So knowing what you can reasonably accomplish in a day is really important, and not to be unrealistic with your goals, because then you'll just end up feeling, again, like that demotivation. So yeah, and then also knowing your limits, going into winter term, if this was your first term taking classes, maybe you found that you took more than, feels reasonable. Maybe you finished all of the work, but it just seemed like a lot. Maybe you need to lower your course load, talk to an advisor about that. I know for sure in my first semester of university, I started out with 5 classes and went down to 3. So yeah, just knowing your limits in general. Positive and encouraging self-talk is really important. It can be easy to slip into like, there's no way I'm going to pass this exam, or I can't get everything done before, the course ends. Just be really caring towards yourself like you would to a friend. That can be an easy way to try to think about it differently, is would I be saying this to another student or another friend? If not, then change your self-talk. It can really help. There are, of course, like general relaxation techniques. So someone mentioned meditation, that kind of falls in here. Being mindful. So basically any activity that encourages you to engage fully with the present. So like really, paying attention to the sip of coffee that you're having while you're working on your paper. Or things like, going on a walk where your only goal for that 10-minute walk is just to really like notice the temperature of the air and the smell of the crisp snow and all of those kinds of things. And of course, deep breathing, someone mentioned that. Visualizing can be a nice and quick activity where you can sort of picture settings that make you happy. Maybe there's a family cabin that you go to or some beach that you like, picture that. And then we have progressive muscle relaxation listed here. So that can be a good one. There's lots of videos online where you can do guided progressive muscle relaxation, where you basically focus on different muscle groups in your body in order and slowly relax them. And that can feel really good, especially when you're really stressed. This one's probably obvious, but it's worth repeating: getting enough sleep. I did not get enough sleep as an undergraduate student or even as a master's student. And I finally started prioritizing it during my PhD, and it makes the difference that they say it does. So yeah, it can be challenging, especially if you have a full schedule, but it's important as much as possible to get enough sleep, not only for your health, but also for your cognitive abilities as you're working as a student. It's really hard to study and prepare for things when you're feeling foggy and not well. And lastly, reaching out for support. So that can be personal supports like family or friends, or there's lots of resources on campus that we want to highlight too. So the first one, and there's the link in the chat, is the Healthy You. So Healthy You provides a lot of information and engagement on social media and other things. There's going to probably be in-person things at some point when health orders allow and things like that. But for now, you can go to their website to see what they're offering. And we highlighted the mental health page specifically just because it taps into this. And there's so many more techniques and things that are outlined there. They actually have packages, they call them. So there's mental health packages on this website. There's one for anxiety, there's one for depression, there's one for managing stress. So you can get a little bit more detail about some of these strategies. And then of course they address physical health in general as well. So lots of good resources there. Amanda, I don't know if you wanted to introduce this one or if you'd like me to take that one on.
Yeah, no, sure. I can talk a little bit about this. So another resource that we have on campus is virtual appointments with a peer helper. So we have peer helpers on campus that can talk to you about adjusting to the term changes as a result of the pandemic and the strike. And really what they are is they're a non-judgmental listening ear. They're also students themselves, right? So they're your peers. They have been through this as well. So you guys can kind of share your experiences and stories. And, you know, they can give you advice where they see fit or where they feel that they can advise. And then they also can, like if you're looking to get involved with things on campus, they know all of those connections as well. So yeah, they're a really great resource. So if you're looking to get a little bit more engaged with your peers, learn a little bit more about campus and just wanting to get involved, this is a good resource to check out.
Yeah, and I just wanted to highlight as well, I was speaking with some of the staff this morning that work with the Peer Helper program. So they have lots of virtual appointments still available. They are running right now in December. They'll probably have even more consistent availability after December, but they did highlight that there are still appointments available and that the peer helpers are super excited for people to book. So you can definitely feel free to do that. And as we mentioned, they can help you meet new people, get involved on campus. One of the ways that they do that is connecting you with other things on campus, like student groups, etc. Or campus resources. But the other is that sometimes they have their own events too. And if you go to this link, not only will you be able to find the booking page to book kind of a one-to-one conversation, but you'll also find any group activities that they're running. So again, just the student run thing. I think they're doing one tomorrow and one next week where everyone just kind of drops in and makes Spotify playlists together and kind of just chats about things. So if you're looking for kind of just a way to even just get to know some other students, that's a great way to do it. So, yeah.
And next we have highlighting the Student Counseling Center. So if you're, feeling that you need another resource to kind of help you manage some stressors, you may want to check out their website. They have a variety of different group sessions and workshops. They do have personal counseling as well, so one-on-one counseling sessions. And then they've got a number of different online resources there on their website too. And then some external mental health resources that you can access 24/7. So if you're, feeling that you are really not managing your stress well and that you are in a crisis situation, there's links to resources on their webpage there. So check that out if you feel that it would be helpful for you. And then one other area is the Virtual Advising Help Center. So if you need some academic advice, you're not sure where to go or what resource on campus you need, but you need help with something, check out the Virtual Advising Help Center. They're open 7 days a week through phone, video call, online chat. So the link is there. And then that kind of wraps up our presentation today. If you guys have questions, feel free to pop them in the chat, and Steph and I can try and answer them the best that we can.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, so I don't know, Allie, are you still here?
I am still here. Yes, I think I'm sorry. I had myself on mute and in perfect Zoom fashion was trying to multitask, which these ladies probably already told you is not a thing to do. And here is the example of why multitasking does not work. But what I will say is this session has been great. I think this information is really important. We have, again, supports on campus to help you out. First Year Center is the easiest one. Virtual Advising Help Center is also there to help direct you. They're not really there to answer exactly your questions, but they can help direct you to the right place to get the answers to the questions that you need. And yeah, I think, again, like, it's been great having you with us. Thank you for attending our session today.
Mm-hmm. There is one question that someone sent to me directly. Wondering, they were wondering, where can we access this recording, and are there recordings of any kind of previous sessions or similar like workshops, I guess? Like I know that this is kind of our first post-strike recorded session, but
Yeah.
There's probably other workshops that have some similar content that they could review too.
So here is, I'm just pulling up the post-strike website. Oh, and I just clicked on something, took me the wrong place. Here we go. So, nope, this is not the place it'll be. Oh my goodness, post-strike, there we go. This is how Zoom goes these days, right? So I'm gonna just plunk this post-strike website into the chat. So the recording of this session will be available on this link, but the information that we shared, or that Amanda and Stephanie have shared with you today, it is actually available in other places. So UM Essentials actually is a really good place for you to go back and look at some of this. The time management stuff, the avoiding procrastination, some of the study skills, those kinds of things, those are in UM Essentials, which you all have access to in UM Learn. Also, yeah, like Amanda just put in the chat a link to the Academic Success Workshops. Again, that's a place where a lot of this information came from, really. And it's a lot of the same kind of information that that we're talking about here. Certainly academic advisors, like if you are really struggling with finding this balance, a good place to start, if you're not sure where to start, is to visit an academic advisor in your home faculty as well, and they can certainly provide you with resources as well.
Yeah.